He is the Monday morning quarterback, always makes us smarter. Always great to see Albert Breer, the senior NFL reporter from the Monday morning quarterback. Yes, here he is. Yep.
What's up, guys?
How about that? Albert Breer. He's an NFL insider, by the way.
Oh, hey, Dan.
Yeah.
How we doing?
When you file,
I didn't expect the studio audience, by the way. That's a nice touch.
When you file your taxes, do you put insight? Like, is your job an insider there?
I think I just put reporter.
Oh, you
reporter.
do? Okay.
Yeah, I think I just put reporter.
The first time you were recognized, do you remember? Like, oh, I've seen you on TV.
Yeah, it was probably like when I was still working at the suburban paper in Massachusetts, where I was covering at the same time both the Patriots and high schools. So I had to juggle the two, which was a little complicated. And I started doing a little TV work up there. And I think it was like at a bar on a Friday night or something like that. And it was weird. You know what I mean? Because I've always seen like what I do for a living is kind of stupid. Because I don't think like a bunch of grown-ups playing I don't think a bunch of grown-ups playing a kid's game is the most serious thing in the world. So what I'm doing for a living really isn't very serious. So yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when people. I mean, I'm sure you get it a lot more than I do. So
yeah, but when you're around the other insiders,
yeah,
like, do you socialize? I mean, how much when you see Ian Rappaport or Jay Glazer?
I'm friendly with all of them.
Shefty?
Yeah, I'm friendly with all of them. I mean, I think there's an understanding and respect for how much goes into it, you know, and I wouldn't say like there's no information sharing. I mean, like I think we do talk about things, and like a lot of times with the guys that I'm close with, you know, you'll tell backstories of stuff that happened a month ago. You know what I mean? Like so, like there'll be a backstory to this story or that story that came out, and so you can tell the backstory of something like that's like a month old or 2 months old. But obviously, there's the stuff that's competitive too.
Yeah, but everybody rushes to be the first.
Yeah,
that's competition.
Yeah.
Has anybody stole something from you?
That happens a lot. Yeah. I mean, there's stuff that you're holding on to where you're like,
could you take Adam Schefter?
Well, I have reach on him, right?
Yeah. And Rappaport, you got reach on him.
I got reach on him. I mean, that's the funny thing is like you talk about being recognized, right? What I get more than anything else is like I got this in the elevator at the hotel last night. Oh my God, you're way taller than I thought you'd be.
Paulie said that to me this morning.
Yeah.
He goes, Albert Breer's taller than I thought.
Yeah, because everybody expects like all of us to be 5'4".
Yeah.
Because a lot of us are.
Speaking of Glazer, do you think
that was cold?
Yeah,
you could have picked one of a number of people there. You picked on Jay.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But yeah, Glazer could take everybody though in the octagon.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be a smart idea to.
Yeah,
fight,
you don't want
Jay.
to mess with him.
Yeah.
All right, what did the commissioner say last night that fans should care about?
I think the playing surface thing is going to continue to be a story, and a story here in Vegas with what's happening with the Niners. It's kind of funny because you know what I had heard, what happened out there at UNLV. They lay grass down over a turf field, and that's why it's spongy and slippery, right? And I think the NFL might have messed with the wrong team on this because that is the most militant team when it comes to playing surfaces. And Kyle Shanahan's very serious about it. And I've talked to Nick Bosa about it a bunch, and he thinks it's horse you know what that they're forced to play on artificial turf. He, of course, tore his ACL at MetLife 3 years ago. When he looks across the Atlantic Ocean and sees the way that European soccer players are treated. So after the story last year, right, like with the slippery surface in Arizona, the fact that the field here is the same, right, because they've got the rollout field, and then, of course, what's happening with the Niners right now, where the Niners might actually move one of their practices later this week to avoid playing on what they've been assigned to at UNLV, right? I think this is going to be a story all week, and it's part of a much larger story in the NFL. And then, of course, the gambling stuff, which, I mean, like a complete 180 on what they were saying in 2012, 2014. And so, you know, the incorporation of gambling, I mean, hell, Caesar's name is on a stadium in the league right now. The incorporation of gambling into the NFL community and how important a piece of everything it is for the owners now. Like David Tepper literally bought the Panthers when he bought the Panthers, because he was like, legalized gambling's about to happen everywhere. It's going to juice the valuations of all these teams. Gambling, I think, is going to be a big story all week.
Are we going to see all the stadiums where you have a kiosk that you can go and like the
Yeah.
Premier League has that where you can bet and everything is. I mean, I would put it all under one
think
roof.
so, yeah.
The Cubs have. There's certain baseball teams I think have this. But
Yeah.
the Premier League, you can go gamble there and go watch the game.
Right. Well, I think what Vegas has taught them, right, and you'll see this elsewhere now. Like here in Vegas with the Raiders, their competition to get butts in the seats is a sports book, right? So their competition to get people into the stadium and watching their games is the idea that you can just go to a casino and watch all the games and bet on whatever you want.
Yeah.
So they have to give you what you're getting somewhere else in the stadium. And that's where I think the dam sort of broke. You know what I mean? And if you have sports books now in every NFL city, which eventually will probably get there, well, then that's going to be the competition for them to get people in. And at a time when it's harder and harder and harder for teams to get fans into those seats, right? Like we know that. You got to give them what they can get outside. And one of the things they're going to be able to get outside almost everywhere pretty soon is the ability to bet on all the games.
He's Albert Breer, the Monday Morning Quarterback, senior NFL reporter. Explain to me what happened with the Commanders, with the coaching search and what happened with Eric Bieniemy. Was Belichick in the mix there? 11th hour. I mean, wherever you want to start here.
I would say like one of the things that Josh Harris and his group really focused on was structure, and I think that's one of the reasons why Belichick didn't fit into it. In fact, I think like overall owners' obsession now with looking at different structures across all of sports, in soccer, in basketball. Josh Harris obviously owns a basketball team, owns the Sixers, so a lot of these teams have looked very intensely at structure. And I think that's why, like, the all-powerful head coach, the Bill Belichick, the Mike Vrabel, had much more trouble finding work in this cycle, is because it's like, okay, like, so before I've hired the people, I've set up the structure, and does this type of coach fit into that structure? Or is this type of coach valuable enough where I want to fit the structure around him? And I think a lot of these owners now are picking the structure over the coach, which I'd argue might not be the best way to do it, but that's the way they decided to do it. So they hire Adam Peters very, very quickly, and they were efficient about that. They got him within the first week. And they wanted to be wide open about their process. So they had Zoom interviews with, I believe it was 8 candidates. They brought 7 of them back for in-person interviews. And they wanted to be open-minded about it. Raheem Morris almost got the job 2 weeks ago, very close to getting the job 2 weeks ago. The Falcons gave him an offer, and that made the Commanders really think. And we want to finish our process. We want to meet with everybody. They were obviously interested in meeting with Ben Johnson. That didn't go so well on Monday with the way that they got the news there. And then the final 2 were Mike McDonald and Dan Quinn. And Seattle swooping in and grabbing McDonald sort of clarified, simplified things.
Did they want Dan Quinn? Did they settle?
They love Dan Quinn, yeah, like they do.
But they settle for Dan Quinn.
There are a lot of common connections there, though. Adam Peters came from San Francisco. A lot of the coaches in San Francisco worked under Dan Quinn in Atlanta. So Kyle Shanahan was Dan Quinn's offensive coordinator. So Quinn, like, the references were great. He knocked the interview out of the park. Is it as exciting a hire as Raheem Morris or Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald would have been? Maybe not. But Dan Quinn's somebody who was in demand the last couple of years. So I think settles the wrong word. I think they were just kind of committed to riding the entire process out. And because of that, they lost a couple of guys along the way.
Does Belichick coach in the NFL again?
Yes, I think he coaches in 2025. I think, again, like I think the fear with Belichick and Vrabel, and I think it's not a great commentary on the NFL and how NFL teams operate that those guys couldn't get work, that you had 8 openings. And Bill Belichick, who's the greatest of all time, and Mike Vrabel, who I think was a top quarter of the league, like a top 8 coach or so in the league over the last few years, couldn't get work. I think, again, it comes back to that thing about like what owners want. And what owners want right now is A, that sort of structure that we talked about, and B, and this sounds so stupid, but it's true, they want it to be like fun to come into work. You know what I mean? Like, and how, like, it sounds dumb, right? Like that's your priority. But like a lot of these guys are like, well, I bought the team. I didn't buy the team to be uninvolved. And they're afraid, like, in hiring somebody like Belichick, maybe they'll be frozen out of everything, And so, like, I think that was a real factor. But I think after a year, what we're going to see is we're going to see some of these things fail, And then some people, like anything else, then we're going to see a couple of teams say, well, like say the Patriots go 4-13. It's like, oh, maybe it wasn't all him. Maybe there were other problems there. But then you look at the body of work, and it's like, yeah, the problem Bill has right now, Dan, is that if you have to blow everything up for him, right? If you have to do so much to get him, if you have to maybe move some people out to get him, are you doing that for 24 months? Are you doing that for 36 months? You know what I mean? And that's the issue. And I think the challenge for Bill will be A, showing he can work with a variety of different people, right? Which I think there's a perception that he can't. And B, giving whoever the owner is the exit strategy. Like, hey, here's what it's going to look like when I leave. And here, like, I'm going to put your next coach on my staff. And I'm going to do things so in 24, 36 months, when I walk away, because I'm 75 years old at that point, you're not going to be dead as a franchise for having had me here.
See, I thought the Eagles were going to maybe pull the trigger on Bill.
Yeah.
Because they did everything but fire Nick Sirianni.
Yep.
Mike McCarthy, Jerry's going to give him another shot, but it feels like he's got one shot.
And those two would make sense because those two have veteran teams, right? And those two have established structures where they're not looking for something new, So it's like we can plug Bill into this and it's not going to blow everything up. Bill has a relationship with Howie Roseman, right? So a working relationship's different. Who knows how that would work out, but there is a relationship there. Bill has a very close relationship with Jerry and Stephen Jones. People don't realize that. Like, there is a lot of mutual respect there. And I think that was a thought for the Cowboys, And I do think, like, you look at their roster, they're another team that's sort of in this win now position. And I mean, one thing about having an owner so involved, like Jerry and Stephen are involved in Dallas, is it makes it so there aren't these layers of management between the coach and the owner. I actually think, and in some ways people are like, well, would that work with the meddling? It's like, maybe it would be an issue, like maybe there'd be some friction, but at least you've got the coach has a direct line to the owner there. There's not like all of this clutter around the relationship.
Caleb Williams going to go number one?
I think so, yeah. I mean,
why is there this confusion that there's been misreporting, it feels like, or wishful reporting that maybe he says he doesn't want to go to the Bears?
I mean, I think it's because of his dad. Now,
but is that true that he might not want to go to the Bears?
I mean, I think it's something that I would say a lot of the crazy stuff that you've heard, like, right? Like, so there's the stuff about the equity, like wanting equity in a team, right? Like, which was, I mean, bat bleep. You know what I mean? Like, but I think a lot of that stuff was coming from his dad.
He can't get equity.
No. And what all these teams are sort of looking like, because when the scouts go into USC, what they're hearing from the teammates, what they're hearing from the coaches, Cliff Kingsbury was one of them. Like, they all love him. They love him as a kid, but there's all this noise around him. And so the challenge for the Bears, for the Commanders, for everybody else is like cutting through that and seeing, all right, like when he gets here, what's it going to be? Is there still going to be this noise, or is the kid that the USC players, that the USC coaches, that the Oklahoma coaches, that the Oklahoma players were around, is that what we're getting? It's going to be interesting because I do think, I mean, look, like the Washington storyline is not going to die. They hired Cliff Kingsbury. He grew up in Washington. He went to high school in the District of Columbia. So the idea that Washington could move up to go and get him, like, that's a storyline that's not going to go away. And if Washington assesses him as being that much better than Drake May or Jaden Daniels, well, then do they move heaven and earth to try and do it? And how do the Bears react to that?
Why didn't the Bears hire Cliff Kingsbury as their offensive coordinator?
I think the Bears got the best offensive coordinator in the cycle. It's a fair question. It would have been a pretty funny tell to Justin Fields what you were doing. But I think I give the Bears a lot of credit for what they did, because I think Shane Waldron would have had 3, 4, 5 offers. I think he was the most attractive offensive coordinator candidate on the market. And on paper, that's not a great job. On paper, it's like Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles could get fired in a year. But they got ahead of the market. And so while these other teams are considering, quote unquote, considering Shane Waldron, and maybe would have offered him 3, 4, 5 days later, the Bears came with an offer and got him. So the Bears are still assessing things, but I think the likelihood is they take Caleb number 1 and trade Justin.
I'll leave you with this. How important is the Rock to the spring league working? Like, what is the success of the spring league going to hinge on?
I think the success of the spring league, and I think one of the things that, like, the Rock and the other people that are involved can do is build relationships with people at the NFL. They need the support of the NFL. I think that much is clear. We've seen enough of these leagues wash out. The NFL needs a minor league. They need a developmental league, especially with what's happening in college football. And, like you get some of these kids that are transferring to 2 and 3 schools and then coming into the league, they're less developed. They're more raw. There's more work that needs to be done. And, especially with the quarterback issue, Dan, like one of the biggest reasons why we had so many quarterback injuries this year, and one of the reasons why we've seen so many quarterback injuries, the NFL's having real trouble developing offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And it's because at the college level, they're playing in the spread. So a lot of the offenses just stand up and hold your block for 1 second, and then the ball's out, right? And so then you get this kid who's raw coming out of college, and all the rules now in the NFL around practice in the spring and the summer and then into the season limit contact. Well, who does that affect? That affects the offensive linemen, especially the backups who aren't playing in games. So the NFL has to do a better job of developing backup linemen, do a better job of developing backup quarterbacks. And I think having a league like that, the way NFL Europe once was, can really be beneficial. The question is, will they help invest in what's going on with the spring league now to make it work? And if the people who are running the spring league can foster that relationship and get that relationship to a point where the NFL will invest, then maybe it can succeed.
Always great to see you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. He's Albert Breer, the Monday morning quarterback. We'll take a break. Play of the day is up next here on the Dan Patrick Show.